All right, guys, thank you for coming to the Missouri Show. I just want to say personally thank you, and thank you for supporting the Missouri Taxidermy Association. I'd like to introduce to you Brett Winfield. He is our fish judge, and please feel free to ask questions. That's how we learn, that's how we network, and enjoy yourself. And once again, Brett, turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thanks. This seminar got the gears changed a little bit on it at the last minute. So anybody that wanted to do the carving part of it, that may have to be over here later. We are going to paint today. We're going to do some detail painting. It's one of the things that I think I personally always leave to the very end. I short myself time, and what I want to show you is some options, some opportunities to really do some cool stuff with your fish that I hope you will budget time for in the end, so that you're not glossing fish at the show half an hour before it has to be in, because that's me. If anybody else has ever done that, you know what I'm talking about. But I started this fish. We're going to start with a smallmouth. This is just one of our customer skin mount fish. I think we did it actually as a student demo not very long ago, maybe in our winter class. And I've got some base colors on it. And what I wanted to do was get us a little ways ahead. So I did some of the scale work with liquid scales. And I like to put that on really early. Anybody that has played with scale tipping or scale details, I'm going to get away from that term tipping, and I'm going to refer to it as details. But and the reason I do that is tipping tends to lend itself to the idea of a location, and I think there's all kinds of details within a scale rather than just a little bit of gold on the back side of it or on the tip. So we're going to call it detailing. But the first thing I did with this fish is actually darken it up. It dried really dark. It's a dark smallmouth anyways, but I went over with a pretty dark, a dark green, and just evened out my skin tones. So I had a good base to start off with. And the reason I like dark is because I'm going to put an iridescent on top of it, or a pearl color, which is just the liquid scales in, I started with pale gold, if anybody's interested. That's probably my very favorite color. Every fish is different. Go to your reference, look for that base color. What I like to do is get to a really detailed, blown up picture of the scale, of a general area, and I'll try to look for the color of the scale pocket. That's kind of that, if I can use the board here for just a minute. The scale pocket I'm referring to as kind of the front portion. Any of you anatomy guys and guys that are really studied up on this stuff, please correct me if I'm misleading anyone, but I'm gonna kind of describe it as the front portion of the scale. So I like to look for this color. It's right up here in the front part. There's kind of an epidermis here. If anybody's ever been a little too hard on their fish skins when they're skinning, or has had fish come in and you'll notice scale, not necessarily missing scales, but you'll see breaks and interruptions in the pattern. A lot of times it's an interruption in this epidermis area where it gets broken. It might get tattered back in here. So what I like to do is I'm going to look for this color as kind of my base. I'm really going to seek that base color, and on a smallmouth, this fish I'm going to paint to a kind of a medium green, kind of a pea green color. I want to look for what that's going to be. So the very first thing I did was, for me, green on top of that brown skin is horribly hard to accomplish. that brown seems to come through everything, the way that this fish dried. So I darkened him up, and the very first thing I did was come in with, after darkening him, was in this area, I kind of gave some definition to the front portion here, where right up against that epidermis. I came back about like this, and this is my liquid scales. So that's my gold that you guys are seeing on that fish right now. Makes sense? Anybody following it? I'm already losing myself. So what I wanted to do is start with a base and not have you guys sit here and watch me paint all of these scales. This probably took me 45 minutes or so. I will demonstrate it real quick just so you kind of know what I'm after or what I'm referring to. But this is just pale gold liquid scales. I'm going to put just a little bit on. Anybody tried one of these yet?
I want to.
They're handy. Holy crap!
It's like a water pan.
It is. So what it is, it's a brush. It's a paintbrush. These are bristles here. I'll take it apart and show you.
Do they come in smaller sizes, bigger sizes, or just one size?
I haven't found a small one yet. I think they're out there. And to be honest, the way we ended up with these is somebody downstairs reordering our normal brushes, misordered a number, and we end up with 30 of these things. So we look around like, what are we going to do with that? And they bring it to us. Amber looked at it, and Tom and I looked at it, and we're kind of going, this might not be a bad deal. First thing I did was fill this reservoir here full of paint. They come with something, these don't, but every now and then you get stuff with instructions. I usually throw that away. What I learned after I dug the instructions out, because the paint didn't work, is that this reservoir is supposed to be water. So we fill that up with water. Then you've got another piece here, and I think I can push it through. And there's a little valve right here. Whoops. Right here, and so that's going to go up. Let's see, this little guy goes up into that little water reservoir, and these are your bristles. So these are gonna be wet, continually moist, I should say. They're not gonna be wet. And with just a light squeeze back here, it'll push some water down toward the bristles. What makes that all really nice is that your paint won't dry or gum up. If you've ever started tipping scales and all of a sudden you're starting to get gummy and it doesn't flow nice, this will extend your time frame there tremendously. So I've got most everything done on the front, but I'm going to do some on this side so you guys can see it. I don't know, Holly, if you need to come around, but if at any time, especially people in the back or over on the sides, come on up and I'll show you what we're doing. But for right now, I'm gonna do a few. And what I'm doing is just kind of defining that back area. And these brushes are, I don't know, what, $3, $4, something like that. And so far, now we started with these, I don't know, probably 3-4 months ago. This is still the first one I've had my hands on. It's not all gummed up. It's not terrible. It's still got a nice shape.
Same color in it?
No color
Just
in
water.
it. Just water in it.
But I mean, in the little reservoir where you have
You're just dipping
No
it?
paint. I'm
You're just dipping it,
I'm
okay.
dipping it for my paint. It stays wet.
So it's universal.
Clean it out like this. Yep.
Just clean it in water.
Clean it in a
Clean.
cup of water. I put the lid on it.
You found it by accident. That's excellent.
Yeah, and we found them by accident. It was crazy. But pretty cool. In fact, I'll pass them around. I'll pass this one around. But everybody kind of got the idea of how I got to where I am on the front side. Everybody good? Liquid scales, it goes on super easy. And this is the water brush. I'm going to leave the cap up here, but it does have a lid.
So you don't need to use that liquid scales retarder with that, then, do you?
I don't because it's got a little bit of water in it to help it flow.
Right.
Works nice. Works really, really well. So that got me to where I am now. And so most of the time when we do any scale tipping, and you'll see it, in fact, walking through the competition room, I didn't see it, so maybe I'm giving you dated information, but most of the time when I look at fish in the competition room, the scale tipping is way harsh. It's the first thing you see when you look at the fish. And so these are strong, intense pigments, and they really jump. But if you look at, and I apologize because this is a largemouth picture, but it would apply largemouth and smallmouth. If you look at this, you do see some cool highlights and some nice little shimmers, but it's not like this. It's not quite so vivid and sharp and harsh. So what I like to do is get a good base started here, and then I'll go over it. So I haven't achieved yet the color that I'm looking for. This is just a base.
When you said you wanted to achieve your base color, that I guess the green, and you said brown always comes through. Well, how are you covering up the brown?
So most of that was with this gold.
Okay.
The gold killed the majority of that.
Gotcha.
And now I'm going to go over with green. It's going to accent those. The gold is going to take on a little more of a green color. These scale pockets are going to green up a little bit, and then I'll achieve that greener base rather. If
This is the same with any fish, largemouth.
any fish. In fact, you know, I've done a few different things with them, and there was a time that I would have whited this out, started like a reproduction. That's what I like to paint reproduction fish. I think I can move through that process pretty easily and predictably. But starting with the skin mount, I like the golds, and gold on top of white doesn't come off very well. Gold on top of the dark, or any of your iridescent colors, they kind of need that dark background, and that's tough for us to do as people that start with skins. Skins are always easier for us to tint when they dry light, but if just in the way that the iridescent colors function, they come off of a dark black background better. And the best example I can give you of that is a mirror. If you look at a mirror, the back side of the mirror is always black. So that's kind of what I've done here. So now I'm gonna just take this peat greenish color, and with this light in here, I don't know what I'm gonna end up with, so I hope nobody sees this fish out in the sunlight. But I'm gonna set back. If you were taking notes, I would just note that we're gonna set back the gold. We're gonna set it back behind this green base.
What are you using there, musky green? Yep.
Greenish.
Greenish.
So when you're
Light
painting a
bass
fish,
green.
when you're painting a fish for a show, do
Yep.
you really pay attention to the lighting in your shop?
I do. And I'll paint under a lot of different light so that I'm seeing it, or at least take it to a lot of different light, so I kind of have a predictable light. I've often thought there's room for us to maybe even ask customers, not necessarily a show, but a show would be your customer, what kind of light are we going to display this in, and paint accordingly. I haven't gotten that detailed because somebody's going to come back to me and say something I can't reproduce. But Tom and I were recently talking in the shop, and we've got photo lights that we just bought that are really cool. They're helping us take really good quality pictures of our fish, and they go through on the back. You can adjust them. You can adjust them for temperature, and you can adjust them for intensity. It's only about $140. They're on tripods. There's 2 of them, and you can turn them all the way down to a cool color, so they're kind of blue, or you can warm them up and they'll go all the way through a yellow phase. And why I didn't think of it first, I like to think of stuff before Tom does, but I usually don't. He says the other day, well, maybe we should bring those lights back and paint our fish under them. Well, yeah, because we could change those intensities and those tones and see how they go. If that works, that might be kind of a cool recipe for getting a predictable light, because in this room,
Or even in most
I don't know
rooms,
what
it
we're
sucks.
going to end up. It does. It's terrible. So there's always a dilemma there. But yeah, the light is always an issue. And if somebody comes up with a great solution to lighting, let me know. But
Where do you get them lights?
might be. Where did we get them? We just looked them up online, and they're
lights.
more for photography. Yeah, it's more of a photo light. Yeah, yep. These are kind of a kit. They came with, they call them barn doors, so you can close the doors down on them, open them up. They've got tripod heads. I think it was like $140 for 2 of them. It wasn't bad.
You paint from tail to head with that green?
You know, I
Is it
am,
random?
and that I think that's really important. I like to get it to stack up in that front portion, and so I will paint from tail to head as I do my last applications of it. Again, I have no idea what this is going to look like when we take it out in the light, so I might run fast when we go to the truck. I am painting with lacquer today. If anybody has an issue or problem with lacquers, let me know. I'm not going to do a whole bunch of airbrush painting. I just wanted to show you, as far as steps go, I don't want to leave that real strong gold. I'm going to knock it down. I want to knock it down with this first. But on a smallmouth bass, I think we've got a tremendous amount of detail work to do. So I'm going to work quickly through some of this stuff so we can get into the fun stuff. I am going to angle spray. I kind of angle sprayed those fins. I whited them out. That's another thing. I kind of whited out the fins because they had a lot of damage on the backside, splits and so forth. I backed them with, we back everything in the shop with silk span and Mod Podge. So one handy trick I probably should have left for you to show you. There's a big split right here that's probably 1/4 inch and goes back 1/2 inch or more. If you'll take a brown, this color, whatever it is, if it's purple, take purple. If it's brown, take brown. But try to get to a matching color here on the back side of your fix-it. Just take a paintbrush and brush those fin rays in, and then you can come over it from all that will come through on the front side. Gives you a real good chance to blend those splits and fins. I see a lot of fin repairs that just stick out. They really stand out. But if you blend those in from the back side, put your paint on the front. I'm just talking about paint. But when I do seal it with Mod Podge, so it is silk span, then Mod Podge on top of it. I let that dry, then I paint it with a brush, and I paint those fin rays. Yep, paint those fin rays back in, just to give it some definition. Now it's color, it's not texture, but it does help tremendously. I'm gonna green these up just a little bit. Anybody got any questions, any challenges you've faced lately that we can answer here?
How do you paint black?
What's that?
How do you paint black?
It's tough. That's a horrible color. Black's a tough one. You know what I've been doing lately? For markings that I see black, and I'm trying to follow my own advice. There's not many true blacks out there. There's different color, but technically not black. So I try and stay away from jet black, but I'll use that. It's a polytranspar Yaks nose gray that we use on our deer noses, and that actually works pretty nice for like markings on a largemouth, crappie, things like that. You can darken them up later, but that Yaks nose, it's a little thinner. It's got a little purpley hue to it. Pretty cool color just for a quick out of the bottle color that I use to kind of replace the black step. Good question though. Black is a horrible color to paint. I've got a bad repair or a bad spot here that I tried to paint out, and I'll bring some markings over that, but I hope it's not bothering you guys as much as it's bothering me.
No one saw it, but you pointed it out.
Ugh, missing scales, I hate that. Why don't all the fish swim with that we get in the shop come in perfect? All right, so he's pretty green now. I've got a little work yet to do, and we could make this fish any phase. I think these crazy smallmouth come in more color phases than anything that swims, but that's probably just because I've paid more attention to them. I think your largemouth and everything else comes through a whole bunch of different color phases too. So now I'm going to go through, obviously the next thing we need to do is some kind of markings on the side of the fish, whether it's a largemouth or a smallmouth or a trout or any other fish. We need to get to those general large markings. And on a smallmouth, you're talking about probably 12 vertical markings up here. They'll typically come out up to about the lateral line, maybe above. You'll have a secondary row here, and they'll come way down toward the belly. A lot of ways to do that. Some guys are extremely talented and you can get to it with an airbrush, no problem. Do really nice close-up detail stuff with it. That's great. Or there are some other opportunities, and one of the things I'm going to show you today, because I'm pretty excited about it, are these pan pastels. They work really well for it, and I'm going to show it to you in a few phases. Right now, I'm going to show you just starting. So, a muskie, a bluegill, a largemouth, all those fish with vertical bar markings, when we paint them out like this, they don't dry with them anyways. Muskie might a little bit, a bluegill might a little, a perch does, thank goodness for perch, but this one we're gonna have to make them up. So when you do that, spacing is absolutely critical. If you look at, somebody's got a really nice bluegill here. There's several nice bluegill in that showroom. You guys feel free to chime in here. Typically, I'm not gonna give you for sure forever, but typically, this is gonna get confusing, but the markings on the side of a bluegill, the vertical marks, are going to, if this was your fish, these vertical markings are going to consist of, whoops, that's ugly. They're going to consist of kind of two channels to make up the one bar, like this. Often there's a little gap in between. Then we've got another one here. Now what I want to show you to pay attention to, and again, details, because I think this is one of the fine details that some people miss, and some people, when you get it right, it just stands out. And you may not know why it stands out as, holy cow, that fish looks great. But one of the things I see when people paint markings is this. Here we've got 3 sets of markings, vertical bars. Typically, if this is the width of the vertical marking. This space in between here is less than the width of the marking itself. And if you'll look at your reference pictures and look at both this space and the negative space in between and really pay attention to where those lay, I think you'll notice deeper details in your reference. Bluegill, that will hold true for 75–80% of the reference that I've seen. When I put that all over here on smallmouth, and I put those in the right place, or I put those on, lay them out on here, if I know I've got 11, maybe 12 vertical markings to make, I've got to visually kind of get a ballpark figure of where they're going to start. Because if I start here and just start putting them forward, I may get to here and have 9, and then they're going to look too big or too spaced out. Or I might get to here and have 17, and all of a sudden I stand back and they look like they're little pencil lines up and down. So what I like to do is lay them out first in a fashion that I'm not terribly committed to. These pan pastels work really well for it. You'll find some different colors that you really work well for you. But I'm going to use a dark, and again, not black, but I like this yellow ochre extra dark, I think is the color they call it.
Do you ever use stencils at all, or have you?
I have. A long time ago we had some stencils around, and then if you have the exact size and shape fish and you were to use that to just lightly blush on there to give you a location and then come in and put those markings in, I think they'd work great. And what I always say is in the hands of the right person, they would be amazing. As a hold up the stencil, run the Krylon can across it, and walk away, probably can achieve, there are ways to achieve a little stronger result. But when they worked, when you have the size and the shape, there's certainly something that can be used to your advantage. I'm going to take this and I'm going to shoot for 11. That's just my number from here to here. I want 11 vertical bars. So I'm going to start with this, and I'm going to basically go right in the middle because I know there's going to be some semblance of a marking in the middle, and I'm just going to lay them out. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and I might go to a little bit darker color just so you guys can see it. Here's 4. This is called Yellow Ochre Extra Dark, and I really like it because it's not going to give me, it's not black, it's not dark brown. I can go dark. 7. And I can probably see this a little better than you guys can from where I am. 9, 10, and 11. So that worked out pretty good for me. Seminar stuff never works out like that. I'm gonna go dark so you can see it. Anybody? Can anybody see it from there? You can? You pick it up? It's just gonna give me a base to build off of. Here's a, this is a raw umber shade, so this one's a little more brown, but I'm gonna build them off of this. Just start giving some definition to it. Anybody played with this stuff yet?
Yep.
Anyone
The
else?
judge is telling me that they kind of want you to stay away from pastels because they can see it from a mile away. Don't really like the look of them.
Well, I would say that that's valid. I think that if you can apply them in a way that looks natural and realistic, I don't care if, personally me, I don't care if it's a 64 pack of Crayolas. If it looks good, go for it. I think the more tools you have in your toolkit of processes, of things that you can use, the better off you are, because does it apply to every single fish? No. But if you find something that's working well for you on that particular species, or try something on a bass, and then in the back of your mind you might go, this might be the best thing I've ever done for a king salmon, but maybe not for a bass. If anybody has any question to the validity of it, I'll back up just a little bit to the concept. I think Dan and Corey, we both talked about it at the World Show, or all three of us talked about it at the World. At the time, I had done a largemouth a couple years ago, and I had really good success with the markings. I did all of those markings with makeup, and people had asked me, what'd you do? I said, I'm not gonna really tell you, because one, I can't decide if I'm gonna let people know that I've spent a lot of time standing in the makeup aisle at Walmart, or I was also at the time talking to different makeup manufacturers and finding out I was trying to get an application, a makeup application made for the taxidermy industry that we could use that would apply to leather, both fish skin and mammals. Because think of the things that are done in makeup and special effects for movies and just people that walk around every single day. Super convincing and really realistic opportunities there. And we work with leather just like skin. I mean, it makes sense, right? So what I found in all of the hundreds of dollars of makeup that I've got sitting in boxes at home was that I'd buy a kit, a little cheap $2 kit of purples and blues and cool colors for, not me, they didn't look very good on me, but cool colors for a fish, and they wouldn't stick. They're too powdery. They just sit up on it. I couldn't get them to actually blend. And so in talking with these different makeup manufacturers, they're telling me, well, some of it's, you need some with more or less talc in it. Okay, well, I get that. More or less oil, more or less this, more or less that. And by the time I came up with a product, they were shipping me samples, and by the time I came up with a product that was gonna work, we're talking about, for a quarter, like a penny size amount of it, in 10 of them, I was gonna be $80 for this tray. And I thought, to make any money on that, that's it just didn't make sense. So I sadly kind of gave up on it. And then it was not too much later, Mandy's got these pan pastels. And I was like, well, what about my makeup deal? Aren't we gonna work on that? We'll try these. Okay, we tried them, and it's exactly what I was shooting for. It works, and it works really well, much more consistently. They blend really nice, and they stick. They stick really good. Back to the validity of, is it worth doing? Tim Sockeye, if anybody got to see Tim Gornson's Sockeye at any of the shows, probably one of the nicest fish I've ever seen. Tons of pan pastels on it. My largemouth, although it doesn't have the pan pastel label on it, I think it was, I don't even know what it was, but it was some little Revlon product. Same thing, same application, same type of stuff. So we hear a lot of those, don't ever do this or this or this, and at that point, usually I tune it out a little bit.
Ryan, speaking of Vanilla,
Yeah.
what's that word? Validity.
Yeah.
Brian Nudie uses a lot of that too. That
Yeah.
striper he did.
Yeah.
Well, that-
Yeah.
He did a seminar at World on, so they're good stuff. The only thing I want to say, and you might know it too,
Mm-hmm.
Brad, sometimes it will create like a powder might have fallen to your fin or something.
Mm-hmm.
If you put it on too heavy, make sure you blow that fish off real well before you put any kind of seal coat.
Yep.
If you don't, you're gonna have little specks.
And that's probably what judges are seeing, are evidence of things like
you
that,
just
where it just
blow
gets
the fish off.
Well,
Yep.
I know Morning told me before that he can see where you've blown it off because the powder
Yeah, he
spreads.
And you know, this doesn't seem to streak real bad.
It's
I've
not-
kind of paid
the
attention
Pearl X
to
is
that.
a streak,
Yep.
But
Yep,
'cause he
did
got
really
me
well.
for that.
Yep.
How in the hell he found that on the spiny dorsal, I don't know. But anyway, these are a lot better. But just make sure you blow the fish off and get rid of any excess that might have spread to your fins or anything.
Yep. And super important there. Anytime you're using any powder base, just make sure that it's clean, that your fish is nice and clean. We were talking a little bit today about getting started, and when I walk through the showroom, very first trip I take through that competition room, there's some that blew down, the first thing I'm looking for as I walk by is craftsmanship. This one is outstanding. This one looks like we've got a little issue here or a little issue there, and I don't know if I give anybody extra credit for craftsmanship, but it's way up on my list. If somebody's got a really clean, tight, well executed piece, that means a lot to me as a judge when I'm looking at them. I really like that. So craftsmanship is just, I think it carries through in so many aspects. It might be paint, it might be epoxy, it might be how we treat the fins, but I think it all adds up. So anyway, I've got my 11 bar markings here, and to be consistent, I'm going to bring in the three, I'm going to bring 3 markings through the side of the face here.
What are you applying that with?
This is a microfiber applicator. In fact, did that water brush make it all the way around?
Yeah,
Cool. I'll just, I've got a couple of these. I think that one's already. They come in a couple of different sizes, and they're actually very cool. The neat part about it is the microfiber part, because they don't fall apart. A Q-tip, this works pretty good with a Q-tip, but Q-tips will leave lint. They'll kind of fall apart here and there. But you can put this on. They come with, these pan pastel kits come with actual more like makeup applicators. They're big, wide applicators, and I think they would work great in some of the larger areas. I've seen Tom was playing with the turkey head the other day, and he was using the applicators, but for the fish work, it's a little bit big for me, the way I'm using it now. I think if I gave a kit to 10 people in this room and 10 fish and said everybody go to a different spot in the room and figure out a way to use these, I think we'd have 10 different fish and 10 different applications for it. They're very versatile. Some people may like one thing and others another. So now that I've got those markings basically laid out, I am going to seal them down, and I'm going to do it with just triple thick. What I really like to do, and I was talking earlier to a few guys as we were standing here, I like to have an H airbrush, a Pache H airbrush, sitting in the other slot here, especially when I'm competing. And in that, I'll have top coat gloss, not base coat sealer, but top coat gloss. It stays gloss. I don't ever swap it out. I don't put any other color in it. I don't do anything other than I use it as my sealer. And the reason I like that is this stuff, great product, works really good for a large application. But if I just did a little bit of work on the side of the fish and I want to lock in just that area, I think the airbrush atomizes that gloss better. You don't get as much spatter, and it will lock it in. You can just do a real small spot. You don't have to mess with the rest of the fish so you get uneven areas. I think that in your mammal work, anytime you're sealing down stuff with mammals, this works great, but I hate it in the hair. I mean, you can tell when it's in the hair. So I like to do that. And of course, they also make a matte sealer too. So I like to use that one bottle for a sealer. It works really good. And I'm not gonna put that on real heavy. I'm just gonna put one shot across it and cross my fingers and hope that the humidity here isn't gonna turn that white.
What did you use? Just a matte finish?
This is actually a gloss because I'm gonna build layers of gloss anyways.
You used to fix it?
I used to use that.
It's made specifically for the hand pastels. I do it for the duckbills.
I have
It's
not.
fix it, but it sounds, it's
Basically a fixative that's gonna adhere. Yeah. I have not. I'm glad to hear that. If any, I'd love to hear them. So awesome. Yeah, they really work well, and I think now I'm going to use it just to kind of complement my airbrush work. But I truly think that in somebody else's hands, these pan pastels you could paint whole fish with. Tom made great progress on a turkey head. Went really fast, and I would never have given it the ability to make that big a difference that fast. So it's cool stuff. I like to use it. I'm going to show you in a few minutes what I like to use it the most for. This is nice, helps you get that out there. The good thing about it is it's kind of erasable. It gives you, if you really put one of these in the wrong place, we didn't commit to it too much. We got it laid out fairly evenly, but you can wipe it off before you seal it. So I probably should have looked at this a little bit closer and a little bit more straight up and down, but I think they're basically laid out where I want them. Yeah, they're kind of where I want them. So now we're going to come back, and one of the areas that just because we're talking about it, one of the areas those pan pastels work really well is kind of the mottled look. You can see that in the tail, all these individual little markings through here. We're going to come back and do the belly on a smallmouth. They get that really chalky, mottled, charcoal looking belly. We're going to do that. It works really well for that. These little markings on a walleye or a crappie, really good application for that. But I'm going to go back to the airbrush now. The airbrush is something that I think we all are familiar with, but some guys struggle with detail with your airbrush, and I'm going to give you a few ideas for detail work with your airbrush. Just cleaning it out here. This morning and grabbed this I like to use just a little bit of floor dry. We use Tom in the shop. We have a tote full of floor dry or kitty litter. It's the same thing. This is just kitty litter, $2 worth of kitty litter, and I'll keep me from, hopefully I don't spill it. I'd rather spill the powder than spill a little liquid. So I am going to make a quick detail color. I'm going to go through and finish these markings out. I like a dark marking. And I apologize, I should have the reference pictures pulled up here. My computer's not really cooperating with me right now. So I'm going to wing it just a little bit, but I'll show you what I'm after. This is a little bit of dark brown. I got it all over the place. Golden yellow. This is lacquer thinner. This is a slow thinner. Anybody use slow thinner or any different thinners? Anybody have any success with that? One thing that's really nice, I paint with lacquers, so that's really my my best frame of reference for you. But one thing that's very, very, very nice is to move to a better lacquer thinner, a slower burning thinner. It will dry slower. There's kind of a cleaning thinner and there's a painting thinner. And you can get it from the automotive companies or automotive supply. You'll often see it called reducer. But the science behind it is basically your cheap lacquer thinner has what's called a burn rate, and that's typically about 70 some degrees, so it'll flash or evaporate, an evaporation rate at room temp, so it's fast. Slower thinner will have a burn rate or evaporation rate that's closer to 100. So it's just slower. It will take longer to evaporate, so it goes slower. It is not retarder. There is a difference between reducer and retarder, and I can't quote the science there, but I can tell you that I've taken retarder and added it to paint like this in large quantity, sprayed it, and the paint will never dry. It's still tacky. I have a demo fish that I did at a show, and it's tacky. I got too much retarder in it on my base color. The slow lacquer thinner will not do that. So you can put a tremendous amount of the slow lacquer thinner in it. It won't slow it down like retarder, but it will always set up. It will evaporate. So there's a difference in the two products.
That's just the paint and the slow thinner.
Paint and slow thinner, retarder. I slowed it down too. Yep, a little bit of retarder.
You get that slow thinner like an automotive place?
Yep. Corey Carruthers is the first one that I heard of using it. I'm looking around here to see if I brought my bottle. I don't think I did. But it's, I don't know. So there are paint people that are much more qualified to talk about this, but it actually says on the side of it, acrylic, water-based, acrylic, lacquer thinner. I don't know, acrylic lacquer thinner, but acrylic lacquer thinner. So somebody with...
Have you tried it with water-based then?
I've not. It might function that way
That's
too.
like double the price, isn't it?
Yes, or more. Or more. A quart of it's probably $35. A quart versus a gallon at 15. So that's why I like to put it in a little dispenser bottle and use it that way.
No set amount, you just splash some in there.
Yeah, I'm terrible about measuring if it's 60, 40 or 45, 55. I don't. I don't track it very well. I'm actually dragging my feet because I'm looking for a color here. Black color, there we go. Anybody use life tone colors?
Yes, I use both.
Black green, one of probably 3 colors that I would call my very favorites. Black green, if you let it sit, will always settle out, and you'll look at it, and if you look at the bottom, it looks like yellow ochre. It's just yellow in the bottom, and all your black is up here. So one day I didn't have black green, I only had black. So I started adding just this golden yellow to my black, and I got a really cool black green color. So much so that I probably won't ever buy black green again. I just like it, and this has got a little too much brown in it, but I like to mix up my detail paints, and the reason I like to do that, I paint with a gravity feed brush here. If you can mix in the cup if you want, you can mix right up here and that works great. The problem is if I'm going to go details from here to here, at some point I'm going to run out, and then I got to make sure that I've got the same mix. So I'll mix it up in here, and that way I can just use it straight out of the bottle. So these little dispenser bottles work really well.
Do you try and keep your polytranspar and your life tone
Nope.
separated? You just mix paints as you mix paints?
I just mixed poly
Okay.
and I haven't found any need to.
Well, that's what I figured out too, but I didn't know if I was doing something taboo.
And maybe I am too. I just try it until somebody tells me it doesn't work, and then once they tell me it doesn't work, I'll think, I think it does. I'm going to see if it does. So that'll even inspire me to push a little harder. I like to have a little card, which here we go. Anybody use these waterproof taxidermy tags? They're just tags in the shop. I don't like to throw them away once the customer picks up their mount because they work great as little cards for carding off fins and keeping things, or to come over here and check out see what kind of mess I made out of my paint. So again, the topic is details. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this airbrush way down, and I'm going to paint portions of the scale. A little while ago we did wide sprays. Now I'm going to get in and I'm just going to accent right up in the front part. And if you thin your material down really well, reduce your air pressure. I like to turn my pressure down quite a ways. People ask me what air pressure do you like to paint at? I don't know, it's about like that. I don't like it any louder than that. What number that is, I don't know. Okay, so I've got it turned way down, and I'm just going to get up here where I can paint it consistently.
You're painting the markings now, the vertical
Yep,
markings?
I'm just going to accent all those markings. So I kind of have them laid out where I wanted them. Now I'm going to come in and accent them. And where I like to do most of my highlight work is right up in that scale pocket. I'm going to intensify that so it shows darker than the area around it.
Does that change between species sometimes?
Yeah, yep, it does. And I can make some of these solid, but what I like to do, I don't like to start off with a solid marking. I have them kind of ghosted in here, and even when I did this, I kind of left some space in there between them, because I think when you look at these, you'll see there's overall there's a certain tone, but within that there are weak spots and dark spots, light spots.
That's what I think is the hardest part for smallmouths for me is that a lot of times the center of that scale is absent of a lot of paint or color period. Like it's almost like a walleye in a way.
Yep, you're very right, and that's kind of a challenge. And what I like is by doing all that tipping early, I've got something that's really got some reflectiveness to it, so it's gonna push color back at me rather than have this look just dull and solid. So even though I've got color on top of it now, I've got a good reflective base, and it's gonna show some of the absence of color. Holy cow, getting old. Turn my air pressure down just a little bit more. And it takes getting kind of, you know, a consistency that you're happy with, but once you get to that, once you get everything turned about where you want it, this goes pretty fast and works pretty well.
You hitting each individual scale on that mark?
I'm going in between in the scale pocket. Wish we had a way to project this so everybody could see what was going on. And of course,
Nice humid Missouri air.
yeah, this is something's acting different. I kind of wanted to impress you with airbrush stuff, and we might be moving back to pan pastels pretty quick. But I just want to work through some of these and get them kind of started where I want them.
You do that same process with the pastels and the airbrush on the largemouth?
I do. I did it almost exclusively with that World Show bass that I did. I really like that. Yeah, I'm just going to define those bars a little bit more. I'm going to paint up into that scale pocket. I'm going to retard this a little bit more. It seems to be drying in the brush, and that's not, usually don't have that.
I'm gonna take it that's on a carved form, not a fish on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And this was a demo fish from class, and we have them carve all their bodies, so I don't know if we have one this big.
Hey Brett, them glasses you got on, are they magnified?
These are, they come in both magnified and just a clear lens safety glasses, but I need the 2.5.
Yeah.
But I think they're 2, and I'm trying to get Mandy to find a 3 or a 4.
Yeah.
Like,
Wait till you get older.
oh, I'm,
How old are you, 35?
shoot, I haven't been 35 for a long time.
I bet you're not 59.
Not quite.
Wait till you get there.
Well, I don't want to rush it.
No.
But it's crazy how that goes, and everybody that I've ever talked to has referenced it. You know, you're gonna hit the big 4.0 and you're gonna notice a difference, and
That's what it does.
it didn't happen. Didn't happen. 41, I'm fine. 42, wonder what this is. 43, huh? This year, holy cow, those guys were right. Okay. Holly, how are we doing?
Pretty good.
Where are we for time?
1:30.
1:30? Holy,
In an hour.
it's been an hour jabbering. Now I'm really gonna have to move. I think one of the most important parts of detail painting, or detailing in general, and I'm gonna say this carries from your birds to your fish to your deer and whatever it might be, it's reference material. And every good seminar I've ever been to started out with reference material. You've got to know what you're trying to recreate. And if we've got the better the pictures that we have to work off of, or of course the real thing, the better the ability we have to get in here and start to recreate it. I would tell you, when you're painting, one of the biggest pieces of advice I could offer to people, when you're painting, when you take on the painting process, I would ask you to, instead of look at the concept of, today I'm going to paint a fish, I would tell you, today let's paint the best pectoral fin we've ever painted. Let's paint the best tail we've ever painted. Let's paint a dorsal fin. Let's paint an eye. Let's paint the head, but there's a lot of detail within the head itself. If you can start breaking it down even closer and even further, you're gonna look at things through a little different lens. And when you start looking at a tail, let's just paint the tail in this session, and you might get 10 things accomplished today, but rather than paint the whole fish, let's paint the tail. Let's look at the detail in the tail. This smallmouth, you can see there's almost a Payne's gray hue to the trailing edge of it. You can see in between there's a light colored blue or a purple. You can see out here on the fin rays there's modeling, there's color. There's a real sharp definition between the scale, where the scale quits and the fin ray starts. That's a nicely accented area. The upper lobe of that tail is accented. Really look at those details, and they're going to empower you to make some great decisions and to start using some of this in a new way. You might look at it and go, wow, that modeling pattern on the tail would be easily done with the pastel, I think, and that's what we're going to do with it today. But you might also look at it and go, maybe I can do this little shading on the trailing edge. Maybe I'll do that with an airbrush, or maybe that's going to be a great application for Payne's gray or whatever your favorite color might be. But look at that stuff and set yourself up for some real success with that by getting into those details and starting with a specimen that A is a good quality specimen, but B, a specimen that you have great reference for. That's what gets me excited about competing, is I'll have great reference first. If I've got the reference, I think I've got a fighting chance. If I don't have the reference, I'm not even gonna try. And that's just kind of a...
Do you have trouble using reference from different color phases sometimes?
Absolutely.
Because you can get like a smallmouth with very dark fins and or one with light fins.
Yeah.
You just have to learn how to tie that together.
You do, and that's a great point, Corey. It's reading reference. Now you've got the reference. Step 2 is reading it and understanding it. And fish work, I think, is very artistic, very creative. I am not enough of a fish expert to stand in that room over there and tell you guys that fish don't come this color. If you were to paint a smallmouth pink, I might scratch my head a little bit and ask you if you have some pictures to help me out. Not because they don't come that way, because I bet there's one out there, but I've never seen it. What happens, where I think people do make a mistake, and again, I'm really cautious in counting people off for it, but I will usually present it this way. If you've got the reference material in front of you, does this tail go with, say we're smallmouth, but does this tail go with this fish? This looks to me like a light phase fish. This looks like a dark phase fish. Does that work here in your overall palette? Be careful of that. And it's like a classic example. It's like deer eyes. Those really light colored fleshy deer eyes look awesome. That you can do so much work with them, and those lower lids and the front corners that get into that lacrimal crease, and it's really fleshy in color. Does that color pattern go with a long-haired winter buck? Probably not. Looks cool, but in my reference in the deer pen outside, I don't see that. When those deer get longer haired later into the year, that typically colors up. It's a little darker. So does your reference material support all the way head to tail? I think that's a great point to bring up, that you want to make sure that you're executing all the way through. I like to have an overall picture as well as details like this, just so I know how those things tie, how those transitions tie together. Great point. Okay, let's put a few more of these on and move on. So I'm going in between, kind of accenting the scale pocket here. Anybody ever painted with, what do we use for airbrushes in here? I'm guessing everything.
I
A lot of airbrushes.
Gravity feed.
Anybody use the custom Micron airbrush? Yes, did I hear a yes? Congratulations. That is an awesome airbrush. I would not do, nope, it's an old custom Micron.
Okay.
Super fun story about this airbrush, and it's an expensive brush. I would tell you I would not own it if it wasn't for an unexpected and amazing gift from someone. But I was at the Minnesota show years ago, had judged a couple years, and Jim Willard approached me and just shook hands, how's it going, common greeting. Hey, I need to get a card from you because I've got an airbrush I want to send you. I don't use it. It's in the shop. I bought it for an employee. He insisted on having it. I've tried and tried and tried to use it. My hands are too big. It doesn't feel comfortable. I'm just going to send it to you. Okay. Not sure why you'd do that, but thank you. I appreciate it. Oh, you've done a lot for the association. I appreciate it. Well, what is it? I think it's a custom Micron, he said. It's a fancy Iwata brush. Well, that sounds great on Saturday at a show, but how many beers later is that ever going to happen? Wednesday, I get a little package in the mail with a thank you and a card in it, and it's this airbrush. And I can't tell you how much I like this airbrush, how well it works. Yeah, they are. The difference between a custom Micron and an HPB is that the fluid nozzle and the needle themselves are custom matched. So they grind them and match those two.
So if you have to send it back in, they can refit that?
Yep.
Okay.
So before I did my bass at the World Show, I sent it in. and I just sent them, and I called them. I got a number for Iwata for their repair department. They said, what do you want us to do to it? I said, go through it. Just do anything and everything, replace all the parts, make it new again. And I thought, I'm gonna have a $300-400 bill. I think it was under $100, maybe $110 at the most. By the time they shipped it, I sent it on Monday. I had it back home on Thursday, and I was painting, and it was like brand new. And it was
refurbish it basically.
Took the guts out of it, started all over, and sent me back my old parts. So it was. They're tremendous in their service side. Any of the good quality airbrush manufacturers will do that for you. I would encourage you, before you start on a project, consider having your airbrush looked at, or at least inspect it. Get to understanding your pieces and parts, and
I mean, is it that much better than the other Iwata gravity feeds?
It is,
I got HPBC, I think I got.
I struggled with it for a little while here, and it's back to doing what it's supposed to do. But I'll tell you how much of a difference it made. That happened about 7 or 8 years ago with Jim, and again, I can't thank him enough for it. But it's made a huge difference in my painting. But the reason that happened, so the behind the scenes story is, he approached Tom and said, you know, do you know anybody that would appreciate or use this custom Micron airbrush? And Tom apparently told him that Brett's wanted one for years, because I'd mentioned it, and I was using an Iwata HPC and really liked the C, but I thought, wow, what could I do with that fancy brush? Well, I got it, painted with it, loved it, but I hoarded it. It's mine. I don't want anybody to drop this thing. Tom didn't get to use it a whole bunch. Sorry, Tom. But having come back and had some really nice success with it and working in the studio, I think he kind of got an opportunity to see that not that I wasn't doing anything spectacular. There's no superhero stuff to it, but I think it's the confidence that you get with it. You know your airbrush is going to do exactly what you want it to do. And if I want to, one of the things that I did quite a bit was, you know how a walleye will dry, and if he's got any slime markings on him, these low body marks down here where they meet the white, they may be gone. You may have a spot here where they're much lighter, and you have to restore those and bring them back. Or come up here and accent these dark markings. I have no hesitation to do that. This thing will do exactly what I want. We'll put paint exactly where I want it. I think he kind of got tired of watching me do it, and Tom bought one. So
I'm seeing an early Christmas present.
Have you used the upper end airbrushes from any other company, like Carter Steenbeck or anything?
I haven't. That's one I'd really like to. I've heard great things about it, and truly, I've had great success with Iwata. I stand behind it because I don't really want to make a lot of changes, but the upper end airbrushes from all of your airbrush manufacturers are gonna do things that the lower end won't. And I would tell you, you don't need to spend $500 on an airbrush, but consider it an investment. You're gonna use it every day, and the more confidence you get in that tool, the more it's going to be able to help you. So I would say to those that have done this for a while and they want to try another one, when you get to that point, take a step up, but ask somebody if you can borrow it. Don't just buy it. It may not feel that different to a lot of people, but I can tell you, for me, it made a huge difference in the confidence level that I have with an airbrush. Just get to a place where you're really confident in what it will do for you. I got another one here. And again, I'm just going to paint in between the scales, kind of leaving, like Jimmy had mentioned, some of those voids. Location and size, again, on these markings are extremely important. I've noticed, not always, but a lot of times we miss. I've seen many times where we miss these 3 bar markings. They might come off here or here and not be very evenly spaced. I kind of like to shoot this middle one for that transition right there at the bottom. You can kind of find that. You'll find reference that it floats all over the place. I've got a great picture of a big smallmouth that I caught not very long ago, and there's a huge interruption in that. I've never seen it before. There's a big break in that bar marking. Where did that come from? So there's always something different out there. But
I want to interrupt you real quick.
Yeah.
Mandy from Matuska says that you guys are now carrying the airbrush that you have on right now.
Yep, we are. So Tom bought one and said, well, maybe we'll stock this, maybe we'll just drop ship it, but that is out there. We have demoed stuff. If anybody wants to play with this one, you're welcome to.
Show special, $250.
Better ask Mandy. Ollie, better start asking Mandy. I don't think I'm not gonna sign up for that one, Dan. Maybe Mandy will. But detail, and get your airbrush painting exactly like you want to. I've got what I'm after here. I'm gonna come back now because I'm feeling a little pressed for time, and what I really wanted to show you were a couple more mediums. I'm gonna do the Pearl X powder, and then we're gonna come back to pan pastels. Pretend for a minute that I've got all my markings done up here. I've got these base done. I've got this taken care of. What I want to show you now is some of the little accents and details that we can do up in the head. If you'll take a good head reference picture, I've got a pretty good largemouth here. I've got a great smallmouth on my computer that's not popping up for me. But I am going to just do a few accents.
I had trouble, and I still haven't found a good picture of the inside of like a big mouth bass.
Yeah, inside of the mouth. Holler at me, I've got some I'll share with you.
Okay.
That's an area that there's a tremendous amount of color inside the mouth. Any and all fish, there's a lot of detail in there, and if you want to set yourself apart from some of the rest of the crowd, spend some time inside the head of your fish. It makes a huge difference. I would recommend, if you're going to open gills and open the mouth, take that head off. Give yourself the opportunity to work on the gill basket and the inner part of it, and also you can work on the head from the inside. I've gone so far as to take that head off, and when you have just a narrow opening, Tom and I did that pike years ago. We actually put the head on the bandsaw and cut it in 2 halves, so we were able to work on it that way, put it back together, slide it back on, but really had a chance to do a lot of fun stuff.
The inside of that pike's mouth.
All epoxy work, very slow, but it worked out really well because the tongue covered the underseam, had a very small area which was up front, and then we had that ridge and we're able to hide it right in that ridge. Worked exceptionally well. So again, the micro applicators, did everybody get a chance to see those? They ran around. You can use a brush, a dry brush, that works really well. But these little micro applicators work great for the powder. Now, these are Pearl X powders. They are not going to do the same thing that the pan pastels do. In my practice or function, they act very independently. One does one thing, one does another. I think one of the areas I really like to use this for and add detail to is right in front of the eye. To me, the eye is the focal point of your entire piece. It's the most important part. What's the quote? The eye is the window to the soul, however sappy stuff that goes. I think it's super important. We can do a lot of detail, give a lot of personality to these cold, old, dry, stinky fish by spending some time in the head and giving some detail. So I like to put this accent right in the very front according to my reference, and pretend this is a little smallmouth. Don't be mad at me, but right up here, right on the maxillary bone that comes back, right in front of the eye, under the eye. Remember, we have the soft tissue membrane, but right behind that membrane we have some really strong accents right through here. So that I really, really like. And to me, when it comes, once you've gotten your fish through all of the major markings and all of the major patterns and got the major colors on, the details are very cosmetic. Gene Smith had a great seminar at the World Show last year. Anybody go to it for whitetails? Great seminar. He didn't tell anybody how to do ear detail or nostrils or anything like that. Basically, it was an approach. It was an idea. It was why we do what we do, so forth. Super seminar. One of the things that stuck with me from that seminar was he was talking about different deer. All deer look different. There's pretty deer and there's ugly deer. There's pretty fish and there's ugly fish. His comment was, and it resonates, nobody wants to take the ugly girl to the ball. Let's take the pretty one to the ball. If we're in charge of this, we get to choose what we're going to do. Let's take the pretty one. So we're going to put all of the little cosmetics and all the little pretties and all the details into it to really make something attractive. This is where the art side comes in, and if I were to judge any of my own works and my own fish, I think there are times when I get a little too cosmetic. I go over and above when it comes to some of those details, and I'll sleep easy with that because I think it's not yet. but I, being critical of it, I do think there are some.
You listened to him before
I
last
think there.
He was. Oh, I got nothing.
Well,
remember that? He goes, I got nothing. My fish sucks.
It's something that I think we all have.
We always use a hater on stuff after looking at it.
Yeah,
for 6 months.
we do. You do, and for that kind of a commitment of time, you really look at that stuff and just pick it apart. We're our own worst critics. I've got a green gold here, or I'm sorry, a blue green here that I really like. I see that a lot in the smallmouth reference, especially in some of those transition areas in the lower jaw. I'm careful about where I'm putting it. I don't want to put it in the soft fleshy areas. I want to put it on more of the bony, hard scaled area. But I also used a green gold as well. But I like to go with those details. There are some great accents. Another thing I do that I think is cosmetic, and I'll do it more on our customer fish. I probably won't do it as much on a show fish because I don't see it in the reference very strong. But I like to give just a soft accent to the lateral line. And when I come back and darken, when I give the dark accent, these little soft spots just tend to pop. And I would carry that down just a touch further. Any questions? everybody's familiar with Pearl X powders, right? That's something that's been out there for quite a while. This green gold, do they make it anymore?
They quit making it and they started making it again.
It is back out there. Okay, good. So green gold, it's definitely a color that I wouldn't want to be without. In fact, so much so that when I heard they quit making it, I bought 2 cases of these of this size.
Cases.
I'm still on the first one.
I've got a big giant container full of it,
Yep.
and I paid $25 for a.
Yeah, one of those. Yep. I've got. I think there are 4 or 6 packs that I've got a couple of those.
You guys got that? Tom got some of that? Green gold?
No, that's his personal. They're $25 first of all.
I don't know if green gold's out there anymore. But I have heard that they started making it again.
Any of
So
the duo colors will react differently over the different base, right?
Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
Well, I can't find it. I'll be calling you, but
We will get it. You call Mandy and tell her they're making.
No, I'm
Jimmy
gonna call
says
you
they're
personally. I
making.
want you to tell me some of yours.
Well, I might have some of that too. But Jimmy says they're making green gold again. We better get it in the catalog. Okay, so I just locked that down with any powder, especially the Pearl X powder. I like to lock that immediately, just because it does, like you had mentioned, it does tend to move. So I've got that. I think I put just a light shot over it. Now, to me, most smallmouth have that darker belly. Not all of them, but most of them have some modeling down in the belly area, and that's what I'm going to do. And I think this stuff just is hands and feet above anything else I've tried. And I've turned down the airbrush and done a lot of stuff, but this works really good. I'm going to go to the smallest applicator, and I'm just going to use this yellow ochre extra dark, and I'm going to come down here and start working in some of these little small details. And I'm just rolling this back and forth as I've got powder on both sides of it, all the way around, so I can put a little pressure on it.
Mandy says it's done, Jimmy.
It's done.
Yep.
Do you, when you're painting things like this for
Yeah.
competition,
Yep.
do you really just focus in on a region and paint region to region?
I do. I do. And if I do all the bar markings, ideally, I want to walk away from it.
So you just do the
get
bar
that.
markings and then get away from it.
Just get away. Get this thing out of my head.
Gold tipping,
Do
you
this
probably,
side.
you probably do all that gold tipping in one session either, would you? On a competition fish.
You know what? I like to do it all in one sitting if I can. It's hard, but if I can get all that done in one sitting, the reason I like to do that is consistency. So it's the same from here to here to tail to head, because sometimes when I come back, somehow that stroke might be just a little bit different. It takes on a little different edge or
Your brush changes or something?
yeah. Yep.
I find when I start feeling like, man, I'm wanting to get away from this, and then I start hurrying and it starts going to hell, that's when I try to stop.
Absolutely. And moral of the story, all this detail business said and done, give yourself enough time to do this. Give yourself enough time to actually break it down and look at sections of scales, pieces of tails, pieces of the head, rather than just go, I got 20 hours to paint a bass before I have to have it in there.
Yeah.
Well, if that's the case, if you got 20 hours to paint a bass, what I would tell you is break it down to, I've got an hour to paint a tail, I've got 20 minutes to paint an anal fin, and by the time you get through the whole piece, hopefully you say, 20 isn't going to do it. let's put it on the shelf and do it for the next show. That's not always the way it goes, but if you, I can tell you from experience, rushing, hurrying the process is detrimental. You'll always come home disappointed. Even if you bring back the biggest and most prestigious awards you could possibly ever hope for, you're always going to look at that fish and go, I could have done that part this much better. I think we've all gone down that road.
Oh yeah.
I know, in fact, to the comment of giving yourself enough time, I know a girl who was threatening to get her quail out yesterday. It was skinned, and she was threatening to get it out to bring here yesterday.
Wait, you mean it was just skin, that was it?
Yeah.
What are you trying to do, girlfriend?
It's that cape she keeps in her closet, the red one with the big yellow S on it.
Yeah. You wanted to get a fatal flaw for a green bird, ain't you?
But I also know that ambition too. I've also pushed right to the very end and thought, I can do this.
Horse in the race, it's no fun without one.
Absolutely. But we're all here to learn, and we're all here to have a good time. So.
Would you mind turning your lights on?
Oh, are you guys catching those? Sorry about that. These are the best things ever. But
How many pair did you bring?
We have 2 and
I think we've got
$16.
I think we've already worked through a couple of them.
Yeah. I'm gonna go over and say,
but-
Brett said show special, $10 on the glasses.
You do know that Mandy's watching. You do know Mandy's watching, so.
What do you mean she's watching?
We're live. We're live on Facebook.
Say hi.
We can't take him anywhere. That's why we can't have nice things around here.
This is fun stuff, super fun stuff. These pan pastels are going to give you an opportunity to do some really cool things. Holly, if you want to get in here close. This seminar, but like we said, is live. Holly's got it on Facebook, our Matuska Taxidermy Facebook page, with all of the videos. Anybody in here seen our Thursday videos?
I can see one.
Turn that way. How many people have watched those Thursday videos? So Mandy can see.
Here you go, Mandy.
Ooh. This and all of the Thursday stuff that we started back in December are all archived on the page. You can watch it back. You can watch those seminars. It's something that they started, Mandy and Tom started back in December, and it's just all of a sudden got a little bit of momentum, and we really enjoy it. It's something fun for us to do. We teach. Every year we teach classes, and coming to this Facebook forum is pretty cool for us because we get to talk to you guys on a regular basis, so it's fun. And we get feedback, instant feedback from people on products, new things that we're doing, new things that we're using. So we really appreciate everybody who watches.
I wish I'd known this sooner. This is nice.
Okay, so you can kind of see the opportunity there. If anybody wants to come up, I'll give you just a second here. You can come up and look at the effect that we're getting down here in this belly area with this pan pastel. We got just a little delay there. And nobody wants to hear their own voice. Okay. How are we doing for time?
It's 2:05.
2:05. So technically we've got 25 minutes. That good. Good.
There's nothing set in stone.
No, I think the next seminar's at 3. I want to make sure I'm cleaned up and out of here for everybody. But so these we've got 6 different kits that we kind of put together through the shop for these pan pastels. I think, hope Mandy's not watching, but I think they're normally about $6 or $7 a piece. These are 10 color kits, and she's got them at I think $50 just for the show here for you guys. Yeah, so they're $5 a piece, and we tried to put them into kits that were applicable to birds. We have 3 different fish kits. We've got a mammal kit. This is the fish. We called it highlights. I'm kind of high on the term accents because the highlights might lead you to think that they're light in color, but these are darks. I like to shade and accent with these, so they're kind of accents.
Darker greens. I'm gonna get one.
Yeah, they work pretty well. They really do. And one thing I can tell you is, when you look at like a smallmouth or a largemouth in these colors, if I were to have picked this color out of pick it out of the lineup for colors to do the belly markings, I probably wouldn't pick it first. I'd pick more of a charcoal color.
That's what I was thinking.
But it looks light and green, but if you'll come back and get in close here and then look at kind of what we've got going here in this light reference, it's pretty close.
How long did it take you guys to find those colors? Because some of them, when you put a little even dusting on them, they just disappear.
Yep.
Some of the tints and shades just are gone.
And some of them will actually intensify. They'll get bright. And I think those, like the charcoals and the blacks, get really harsh. And that might kind of lend to that comment that the pastels are too harsh. You can see them from a mile away. I think the tendency is to use black or use charcoal when you see markings. And I would caution you and tell you, really get in close and let's look at a true color of what those markings are. And I'd say start more in this family: browns, greens, yellows.
I love that. Is that the yellow ochre dark?
Yeah, yellow ochre extra dark. It is a nice color, so that's the one we're using with that. The cool thing though is, and when Tom was working through them, you asked how long it took us to get through these, Corey. We've been playing with them for a while, but we I would say only got super excited about them within the last couple of weeks. After Mandy got them here and started really pushing that we use them in the shop. I've used a few colors, but Tom started doing that turkey head, and I'll just show you how we can do some flesh tones.
500, 600 colors.
Mm-hmm.
A lot. I don't know.
Would you possibly use some of the iridescent golds instead of the liquid scales for that gold tipping?
What I've found is that the little bit of experiment with the iridescent colors,
or the pearl color,
the pearl color, I haven't had as much success with it. Okay. And I know that there's going to be a great application. I just haven't had.
Now, when you say you haven't had much success, is it just applying it, or just the way it turns out, or?
Just the application of it. Is it doing what I wanted it to do? Well, no, it's not exactly doing what I wanted it to do. But is it doing cool stuff? Yes. What's the right way to use it?
The liquid scales are better for the gold tipping on that than the powders.
I like the liquid scales because on the undercoat, because I'm going to paint over them, and they really push through all of those colors. They settle down and they still push through. Now, the big accent that I want to show you after I do this, I think the big win is to come back after you paint over it And now let's give a very light accent to the back part of the scale to add interest and add that real pop, that real jump. Yep. Yep.
Would you use the pearl or the iridescent?
I'm going to try the Pearl X and see how it does.
Get a little
Yep.
more intensity.
Yep.
So as a judge, at what range are you looking to see the tipping?
I think it depends on the fish. I think it depends on the light in the room and what you're trying to portray. I would, as long as everything correlates, if your markings are super distinct and your tipping is distinct and everything is jumping out with the same kind of intensity, I think there's a harmony there. If your fish is generally painted very light, your light applications of color, and all of a sudden you have this super harsh, dark, or bright scale tipping, I'm gonna say that they're not working together very well. One's overpowering the other. But as long as they're all within the same comfort zone and family, I think you know, I'm not gonna mark anybody off. There's gonna be different styles, and I personally am not prejudiced against stylized or cosmetic fish. I like it. They're cool. Show me something that's real. I need something realistic, but to have them slightly stylized, I'm pretty sympathetic to that, because that's kind of my own personal the way that I'll do this. So I'm gonna try this kind of purple in some of these softer areas. I've got here at the vent. I'm gonna do just a little bit in between the bronchial osticle rays to help kind of sell that transparency. I might soften that down with white too. Kind of like how that's working for me. I may bring a little bit of that in between these rays.
Thank you, Brett. I gotta skedaddle.
Yeah, you bet.
I got a tea time.
Uh-oh. Good luck. Thanks, guys.
What do you put in that purple?
Yeah, I've got just a purple-ish color. The lids are all screwed together, so I can't tell you exactly which one that is. It's one of our individuals, and it might be in the kits. What we tried to do when we put those kits together is we tried not to overlap them very much. So there may be a color that people are looking for that might be in one of the other kits, or you can order them individually too. We'll have them individual. Okay, so that is an application that I would normally do with my airbrush, and I just tried it with this for the first time with these pastels, and I think it's going to work really well. The one thing I would tell you that I would do is tone it down, and that's something I'm going to show you in just a minute. That is kind of the final step to all the detail stuff. Now that Jimmy and Corey are gone, now I'm going to show you the real secrets, Jimmy, Corey. One thing that I really like to do is I like to soften all of the paint work that I do, all of the details. And to do that, I will take a light color. Typically, I'll paint flesh or white or gray over the top, but I'm gonna come back over these markings down in the belly that I did, and I'm gonna do the one final step with it. And Dakota, you can't tell Jimmy about this because we finally got him out of here. We're gonna start telling the real secrets.
Got it.
Okay. I'm gonna take a light color. Maybe. White, that's white pearl. at the very end here, after I do these markings,